And we are live. Just going to share the video link in our community chats and then we can start. Okay, there we go. Welcome to another Triall Community AMA. It's the 12th edition in this series. And today we will be focusing exclusively on our platform native utility token, TRL. My name is Raymond van der Waal. I'm head of strategic partnerships at Triall, and I'm joined here today by our CTO, Niels Klomp, and our head of operations, Joost Vlag.
Hi, hi everyone. Happy to be here again.
Thanks for joining me, guys. So let's jump straight into the questions. First of all, I'd like to thank our community again for the great amount of questions and also the great quality of the questions that were sent in. We have decided to make a pre-selection of those that were most relevant to our community and to the TRL token. So I'm going to start off with the first question. And if this is okay with you, Joost, I'm going to hand this one over to you. In the video explanation of the dual token economy, you stated TCRED has a fixed price of $1. Being packed one-to-one, are you not afraid new technology will disrupt the pack of TCRED such that it goes above or below the value of crypto assets with which it is packed? How will you handle this?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I scanned the AMA board, and I think I've seen similar questions being asked there as well. So great to kickstart this AMA with that one. I think there's a few important things to consider. First of all, we have reserved a pool of 5 million TRL tokens to support the TCRED TRL conversion mechanisms from the get-go. So in essence, the TCRED token is over-collateralized, which helps support price stability and reduces risk. It's also good to consider that each time a new study is being onboarded to the Triall platform, a platform fee has to be paid. That is subsequently used to purchase TRL tokens from the open market. Those TRL tokens are converted to TCRED, and in that conversion mechanism, 17.5% of the TRL tokens are burned immediately, which introduces deflationary pressure. So when TCRED is converted back to TRL over time at the end of the study, you have to offset this 17.5% burn in order for it to become inflationary. So over time, it is anticipated that with more studies being onboarded, a deflationary token mechanism is introduced. I think another important element to consider is that TCRED, in contrast to the TRL token, TCRED is not publicly listed. It's not open to the community. It really is a client-facing, user-facing token that's being mediated by either Triall or by another service provider. So in that regard, it's not open to some sort of external attack factor, something that you may have seen with algorithmic stablecoins in the past, where it was open to the community. That certainly is not the case with the TCRED token. So that negates that option completely, lowering risk. And I think that probably the most important element to consider is that we project for sustainable growth of the Triall platform. So over time, there will be more clients, more studies that use our platform. And as one study is being completed and TCRED gets converted back to TRL and it may be sold on the market, a new study would be ready to replace the previous study. So anything that would be sold is then bought up immediately again by a new study, which in turn triggers the conversion mechanism where 17.5% is burned again, and that cycle repeats over time. So if you would project for sustainable growth of the platform as we do, then there's little risk of an out of control spiral. It's all about real life utility. And as long as we make sure that new clients want to use our products, new studies are being onboarded, we can project for that sustainable growth. And there's little risk to an out of control spiral between TCRED and TRL. I hope that helps to shed some light on the things that we considered in advance in order to ensure stability of both TRL and TCRED over time.
Well, thank you so much for the clear answer, Joost. And I think it's good that you also really touch upon how TRL is linked to the real world business side of Triall, which is all about onboarding clinical trials and clients on the Triall platform. Jumping to the next question, and I'll be happy to answer this one. TRL is currently multi-chain on Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain. Are you considering expanding to others, like Polygon or Arbitrum, for example? This could help the token get more exposure in theory, or are we happy with the performance on the current chains? Well, it's certainly something that we will and would consider. Currently, our primary efforts are focused on being successful on Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, which, if you look at the larger crypto market, are also both still very popular chains. We are aware that the crypto landscape is vastly evolving, so it's something that we will continue to monitor over time for additional opportunities. And if the opportunity arises and we think it would be a great timing to do also expand to another chain, then that's certainly something that we can do. I'm gonna go to the third question of today. And if it's okay with you, Joost, I'm gonna give this one to you again. Many people are waiting for TRL to arrange a listing on a tier 1 exchange. Is it realistic to think Triall can get a TRL listing in 2023?
Well, I think for TRL to be listed on a tier 1 exchange, which clearly is our ambition, something that we're working towards. But in order to get there, I think it's crucial that we focus on and nurture our token fundamentals. And these are largely centered around trading volume, market size, but probably most important, token utility. And we'll try to focus in 2023 on a few of these things that address that market, so that we will increase our chances of getting listed on a tier 1 exchange. First off, we'll try to onboard as many clients and studies as we can. With new clinical studies, there comes demand for the TRL token. Each platform fee, TRL tokens are bought from the market. So that increases trading volume, that introduces that burning mechanism, which ultimately will make TRL a more attractive token to be listed on tier 1 exchanges or high tier crypto exchanges. And that process, of course, also includes the promotion of Triall and the TRL token through marketing programs or attendance on conferences. That's certainly something we are doing and are ramping up in 2023. On the other hand, we see quite a lot of traction on our decentralized exchanges as well. And arguably, and certainly in my opinion, there's an increasingly popular way of trading cryptocurrency, and it's likely to stay. So it's important that we focus on these markets as well. And while we see a lot of traction and volume, especially the last few days on our decentralized exchanges, it's also fair to acknowledge that liquidity depth, for instance, could be improved to lower slippage for our traders. And that's another commitment we want to make in 2023. So we will be deploying liquidity towards our decentralized exchanges so that we can lower slippage, attract more traders, investors to our market. And ultimately, this will create a better market for our community. So that's another focal point of our 2023 goals, to increase liquidity on our decentralized exchanges, all geared towards making a better market and increasing our chances of getting listed on a tier 1 exchange or a high tier exchange over time. So we focus on our fundamentals and we will get there if we do what we're good at.
Thanks, Joost. So let's talk a bit about utility. I saw several questions related to utility in our AMA question portal. And I like this one in particular. It's obvious that the TRL token has good drivers for demand, like incentives for holding, such as staking, utility, and a growing community. Yet, I couldn't find any clear plan for utility expansion in the roadmap. If there are any, what are they? Because it could correspond to an increase in value if considered. Niels, could you dive a bit more into the future utility of TRL?
Yeah, of course, and indeed, it's a great question because, of course, the token is at the core of what we're doing, and what we are doing actually is what probably most of you don't know is that we are working towards what is called a clinical trial data marketplace, and that sounds a bit scary because a marketplace obviously, well, as the name implies, has a concept of buying and selling. With clinical trial data, of course, you're talking about highly regulated data as well as data which is just by the nature of clinical trials highly confidential typically, and there's a big aspect of privacy, of course. So what are we doing there? We are basically working towards a clinical trial data exchange, which is using privacy techniques. And of course, I've been talking through the last AMAs quite a bit about the technology behind it, like self-sovereign identity. So being able to control your own identity as an organization or as a person, and using cryptography to prove things about you, using verifiable credential technology to get certain attestations, certain attributes about your identity or about your organization's identity, or as a person about you, in order to prove them to third parties, to verifiers. And actually, that technology allows us to create this marketplace in which this SSI technology and blockchain technology is being used to make sure that you know that the parties you are engaging, that they meet a certain criteria, and that isn't something that they just are sort of self-attesting that they do. No, that has been checked by a third party. And we're using that to basically be able to onboard all kinds of different parties. So those could be participants in a clinical trial, those could be organizations, employees. And if there is a need to exchange information, this SSI technology will enable that. And what the data exchange marketplace is doing is that it's using technology called secure multi-party computation, which is quite complex technology, using homomorphic encryption to encrypt data. And the easiest way, I guess, to explain it is that you sort of have this sort of shared databases between different organizations. Each organization has its own data. You don't want that data to leave the premise or want to get into the hands of third parties. But with secure multi-party computation, you could see it as one big database without that data crossing the borders of those organizations, and then being able to sort of ask questions and queries about that data without actually getting access to all of the data. So it's like sort of a black box in which data of multiple parties, of multiple clinical trials is hidden, but you can ask it certain questions so that you can get the answers out of that without revealing the actual data itself. And that is what we're working towards in the clinical trial data marketplace, and that's something for which we will see a first version, which is definitely not the end product we are working towards, pretty soon. And of course, as part of that data that's being used and being accessed, there's a need by certain parties to, for instance, have to do computation on that data, in which typically artificial intelligence could be used, for instance, or in which certain algorithms, like machine learning algorithms, are being used. And there's certain parties that want to, for instance, combine data sets from different clinical trials to get better results, because the more data you have, typically the better the results are. And that's what is called the new data economy. Data is money. And of course, what we will be using is the Triall token, and specifically the TCRED token, to be able to pay for instance, asking queries in that data marketplace about certain data sets, or be able to provide certain data sets. So parties are willing to pay for that. And you will definitely see an increase, of course, of the Triall token. So it's not only used for clinical trials itself, for having a participant doing a clinical trial using our platform, but you will also see that for those data exchanges. And I think what you will see is that there will be an increasing demand for this type of data, simply because it improves the quality of the data, and people are, and parties are willing to pay for that, and that's where the token will also come into play. So that's definitely not mentioned in the roadmap, but that's definitely what we're working towards.
Thank you so much, Niels. And as expressed in a previous AMA, we do plan to provide a updated roadmap soon, where we will also touch upon all of these implications, the technologies that we use, and the role of Triall within that vision for the coming years. Joost, I have another question for you. What happens when TRL suddenly doesn't work properly, faces problems, has increasing downtime? How will this affect the clinical trials, and how will the safety and security of data be guaranteed?
Well, the TRL token, as it's being used currently, really is a means of payment, and therefore has no direct impact on the quality and security of our platform. These are two different aspects. If for one reason the TRL token is no longer working, or the underlying blockchain has latency issues, it may affect payment at this point, which we can make up for at a later point in time. But it has absolutely zero impact on the security or quality standards of our platform. So we adhere to industry standard guidelines and regulations that include GDPR in Europe, HIPAA in the US, as well as good clinical practice guidelines and FDA's 21 CFR Part 11 regulations. So the TRL token would definitely not impact the security of our platform, but it does raise another interesting question, because we use blockchain in multiple ways. We have our token economics built on Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, but we also use the Accumulate blockchain and LTO network to anchor our clinical data. And if these blockchains for some reason would stop working, then that would have a direct impact on our clinical operations, because data is no longer being anchored there. So what we do currently, we use multiple chains in parallel exactly for that reason. So if one chain stops working for one reason or another, there would always be a backup chain, so that we can ensure continuous anchoring of our clinical trial data that allows users to indisputably verify and prove that data is authentic and unaltered, which is crucial to the way we conduct clinical studies.
Yeah, and if I also may add, from a technical perspective, one of the things we also are doing to minimize any impact, for instance, on those chains, is that we also have the concept of queuing. So whenever basically we are writing data to a blockchain, we are putting that into a queue. So normally it will end up immediately on the blockchain. But if for whatever reason the blockchain might not be available, it will get anchored basically at a later point in time at which the blockchain is enabled. It does, however, of course, impact the product slightly, because if you want to do verifications, for instance, and especially if it's data proofs, if the blockchain isn't available at that point in time, obviously we cannot do a verification. But those are typically not really time-sensitive parts of the application. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Niels.
Great addition, thanks. Oh, that has brought me to the last question of this AMA, and I'll be happy to answer that one. Can you explain some of the technical aspects of how the two-token system works, such as how the value of the utility token is determined and how the system ensures that users can easily switch between tokens? Well, we have written extensively about how the current token economics work and how conversion between TRL and TCRED works, specifically in a Medium article that we have published on the Triall Medium page. We've also provided an updated animated explainer video that explains step by step how this process works. So I'm not sure if it would make a lot of sense to explain that in detail now during this AMA. I think it is important to really think about what are the overarching principles, such as lowering the total supply of TRL, promoting liquidity, some of the other topics that have been addressed by Joost at the beginning of this AMA. If you are left with any questions, please do go to our Telegram chat. We're always happy to answer any questions that you have. Also, any follow-on questions that you have based on this AMA. The last thing that I'd like to announce is that we will be opening a new staking pool by the end of this week. So for all of the TRL holders that have currently staked their tokens or that are looking to stake their tokens, there'll be another opportunity as our last pool is closing. So for those that are watching, thank you so much for joining us on this session, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.